And we thank you for taking the time to be with us. This is Brunch. I am Rennie Bishop. We had the pleasure of having Brian Frontin on the issue of tourism. And some days when your studio is alight, you know that the stars are coming out. And I don't mean in the flippant context. I mean in a very serious area. Folks with dedication to Trinidad and Tobago, dedication to their profession, and giving of their time and their expertise, so we can all follow through in context the issues we're dealing with. In 1989, my guest Anne-Marie Mora, a counseling psychologist, returned to Trinidad and Tobago after completing her master's degree in psychological counseling at Columbia University's Teachers College. She has worked as a guidance officer in the school system for a number of years. Actually, she started doing that in 1998. She's the founder of the Mariama Children Museum and Teen Turf. She is the president of the Trinidad and Tobago Association of Psychologists and the author of 2 books, Parents, Are You Listening? And Children, Are You Listening? It is indeed a great pleasure for us to welcome again to Brunch Anne-Marie and Anna Maria Mora. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you. Thank you very much,
The
Rennie.
issue before us, every time you look at it, it turns your heart. It just turns you out when you look at what's going on in our schools. But one does not have to look very, very far. Let's see. It was in 1989 at a tutor conference entitled Violence in Schools. You stated part of the reasons are absentee fathers, mild mental retardation, frequent shifting of parental figures. You went on to say shifting parental figures actually change a lot of dynamics in the home. So you were identifying these issues as far back as then. And before we go into the issue of bullying and the attendant violence in schools, I will ask you this. I only highlighted some areas, but I read all of what you had to say. That it was quite a lot. It was a wonderful guide. What happened to it? Who was listening or not listening?
That's an interesting question, because I got back here and it was just as tutor was having this with the Ministry of Education, a national consultation on indiscipline and violence. Mm-hmm. And I said, okay, let me go make a presentation. I used the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, which is the Bible of mental illness, if you want to categorize, find out why, how, what. Mm-hmm. And one of the things about misbehavior and classifying it is that it must be repetitive. Mm-hmm. Some kind of indiscipline. It's a repetitive and persistent pattern. Mm-hmm. Persistent pattern of conduct in which either the basic rights of others are violated. Mm-hmm. Okay, the basic rights of others are violated. So. Mm-hmm. For it to be called that, it has to be persistent, violating of rights of others, and the societal norms. What is normal for a teenager? The whole thing about saying boys will be boys, mm-hmm. We say that when boys play rough. They look at WWF and they come in the schoolyard and want to put the moves on, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And somebody gets hurt. Those are things that we, because of the progress we have made and technology, we really have to rethink some of the traditional sayings, I guess, that we use and say all the time, that boys shouldn't cry, boys don't feel, they're not supposed to feel.
We give them the art of suppression.
Only girls feel all over the place, so we allow our girl children to feel. We will hug them and say, okay, sweetheart, we understand. Come and get a hug. But our boys, we say, listen.
Be a man.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. And those are some of the things we see playing out in our society.
But I was moved by what you said, because it stated early that bullying is going to lead to violence. We're going to get there in a moment, but it said early, before you get into the bullying, understand from whence bullying comes. Yeah. It can come from changing parents in the home. It can come from psychological physical, verbal abuse in the home. It can come from the example of reconciling differences that a child sees. So it has to start in the home. And for that reason, I was moved reading that piece from 89, because I said if anybody was listening, they would realize that they talk about a social contract being kept or not being kept is a forerunner in some part to what we're looking at. Just so listeners be clear, I'm not scapegoating. Who is it? Dr. Dan Olweus, I believe he's a professor of in Scandinavia, somewhere in Norway, I believe it is. So way back from 1991, we can see bullying happening all over the world. I mean, the percentage was ranged from 14% to 17% in schools. That's in schools. But as I said, I was moved even looking at that study as to what you said. Let us look at the genesis of this problem, or as close to the genesis as we can.
Yeah, the point too is that it's extremely difficult, and today it's even worse, because my suggestion was that we set up programs in communities to have our young people who might not be getting the attention, might not be getting the education, the social interactions as that would help with peaceful and harmonious relationships. If they're not getting it at home, we need to have spaces where they can come and feel safe to learn these things. And one of the things that I found when I was a guidance officer, and I think we all knew that it happened with me, that it's very difficult to speak with parents or adults without feeling that they are judging you. Because sometimes they are not able to answer the questions that you ask.
That's why the professional intervention is so necessary.
Yeah.
At least there must be something laid out where not just the children, but the parents come in.
We talked about parenting programs across. I mean, they are having parenting programs now, but it's in, little silos. We don't have a national
coordinated approach to
it. And ever so often, I found in my documents, National Task Force on Violence and Indiscipline, Thursday, May 3rd, 2012. And this one, I mean, there were many in between. Okay? And you really do wonder where, because at that time, when I made the suggestion that we set up various or different approaches to how we work with these children, to education, after-school programs, which did start, the after-school care programs, homework centers. But I still feel there is not enough of the psychological education, the social, how we socialize, how we work toward peace with each other. We still enter the exam-oriented homework centers where children are expected to. I have this youth center, and we do a lot of socializing, take them out, let them see that there's a big wide world out there. This street is, the world is not only a street or a yard. It's not the basketball court down the road. There's a bigger world, and you have the talent,
There's always been... I'm sorry.
Help them to recognize what their talent is, where their talents are, and try to put them on the path towards recognizing and motivating them, increasing their self-esteem. After all these years, self-esteem development in the home is not it is not there. A lot of parents do not encourage children. If a child gets 6 out of 10, they want to know where the next 4 marks are. And there's a big story.
That's right.
And you need to know that a child getting 6 out of 10 or even 5 out of 10 might be working harder than a child getting 9 out of 10. They might be really working and trying. And if you encourage and say, yes, sweetheart, you got 6 this time, let's see let us look at your paper and see what happened. And next time you will get 7, 8, 9, 10. By the time you reach C class, you're 100 out of 100.
The very learned voice you're hearing is that of my guest counseling psychologist, Anna Maria Mora. We are talking about violence in the school, but this is why we took the time this morning. We are giving context to this. We are starting from here and we're coming down to what obtains right now. You are the president of the Trinidad Tobago Association of Psychologists, and I think in folks understanding where we laid that table a moment ago, that it must start in the home. I want to take it just a bit forward, to deal with the issue of bullying, because that whole bullying thing is something that is a subset of that home situation we're talking about. I mean, and how is a child to, without these programs you identified and suggested sometimes, how is a child to find his way? Because, I mean, there are so many different aspects that leads to a child becoming a bully. Sometimes it's his own self-esteem. Sometimes it's the area of his understanding of dealing with a situation, conflict resolution, his version of that. Sometimes it's his way of getting attention, which is a very serious matter. And sometimes you demonize other people so that they will look at you as the preferred child. Yeah. So understanding the factors involved in a child becoming a bully. Could you detail that, please?
It's ever since this, because I'm talking about 89. When I had a discussion with the then Minister of Education, the alternative approaches where children can learn and parents can come in and learn too, those who, I guess, is the time, or you can tailor your program to suit the time parents can come in. And not force them to come after work from 5 to after they're tired whole day, or they have to go and pick up children. So you find the parents who come to these programs don't really need it. They are like preaching to the choir or the converted. So there needs to be some understanding that, and even if we can go into the homes, the social workers go into the homes and do it there.
It does raise the question, too, where you raised the Minister of Education was there. You may have to ask the private sector to start thinking of some parenting time during an average work week.
Oh, yes. That is something that we have been, and I did mention that years ago, as parents are threatened with loss of pay, and all different, even, if they go, say, sit with their children to have lunch and maybe come back to work a little later, drop their children to school, they have to hustle, they see them combing the children here in the car, going down in the traffic.
Patience is limited. They're not hearing anything the child is doing because they're doing 20 things at the same time.
Yeah, and the children are being bullied because they see them pulling the hair and saying, sit down quietly, trying to comb here, we have to get here. There's a lot of bullying that takes place on a morning.
There are a lot of people who don't have children in the system now, or don't have children who are victims of bullying, at least so they think, because there are many victims in bullying. The bully is a victim, because invariably another thing that's happening is he's not doing really good in school, and he's learning this kind of conflict resolution early. He's going to pass it on when he gets into a bigger social picture. And if he gets into a picture where his hands and his size is no longer the method of force, he will grab a gun. And so everybody is going to be affected invariably. And that's why we must take the time to understand the bullies. But staying with that parent issue there, we talk about the passive victims. I mean, they are there. They don't look as though they're directly affected by this, but they're quiet. They are low self-esteem. They are internalizing the problems. They are looking on and saying, I don't want to be like that, or I am just going to go along quietly. But they're in fact being victimized because it is suppression. Explain for us, please.
Well, it is. There's a saying that bullied people or children become bullies themselves, and we have the passive ones, because we are still being taught that children are seen and not heard. Children, and even in schools, just recently, about a month ago, there was a young man in sitting in the lobby in a school waiting outside the principal's office. And when a teacher who knew him, he was in his class, passed and said, "What are you doing here?" He said he was such a nice young man because he works well in his class. And this teacher allows children to question him. You know, when they have a question, if they don't agree, it's okay in his class to say, "Sir, but really, you know, let us look at this. I didn't agree with what you just said." He was outside the principal's office because he dared to do that with another teacher. And the teacher found him rude and whatever, all the other words, and go to the principal's office. And he was sitting outside the principal's office waiting for.
And then of course the teacher passing by and seeing what is going on. This question of bullying, there's another side to it that we don't pay attention to. Is that mine? No, it's not. So continuing on this question of children who are victims of bullying, they, after a while, as you say, they can become aggressive because, I mean, survival is survival. Not only that, if you see one person getting along this way, well, the next thing, maybe I need to become one. So nobody's winning here.
Nobody. The first criticism a child gets that makes him feel bad, makes him feel that he's not worthy, he shuts up or she shuts up. And then it keeps constantly happening all the time. It happens all the time, over and over. And there's this quiet resentment that I cannot say anything here, I cannot speak here. So they go out, and of course the peer group where they feel free to, and obviously it might be peers of like minds that the same thing is happening to, and they are angry. They get very angry, and they start to work out ways of getting this anger out because they can't do it home. So it's a little displacement happening. It's just like a boss and an employee. He had a problem with the boss, and he couldn't tell the boss 2 or 3 words or slap the boss. And he goes home and he does it with the children or his wife, and the, you know, all those things start there. And young people will, if they do not feel free to communicate how they feel with their parents, and you know, they will gravitate towards people who in that situation too.
Psychologist Anna Maria Mora is my guest. I want to go back to something you said a moment ago, and I sort of paused when you said it. You said that one teacher said, I allow them to question me respectfully, and I couldn't understand this kid being outside the principal's office because the other teacher thought he was being rude. Is there a problem with the teaching, the training of teachers? Is my question, because it begs that you know, the question of how we approach these things must be something discussed, and it may not have eliminated, but it surely may have minimized the extent to which he was sent to the principal office if there was some sort of uniformity discussion kind of thing going. There.
Staff meetings where
is that something that's lacking?
And this young man he was part of a training program. He did his DEPED. He's doing, and you know, he said he observes where there are a lot of teachers who would have been trained, but they go back into the classroom and do the same thing as if they didn't get the DEPED, and you wonder sometimes what is. I mean, there is pressure to ensure that these children get through the syllabus to be ready for exams.
It's a social promotion as against an education center.
Yeah, and it is...
expediency.
And the schools want... I mean, our Minister of Education now says that he is a little concerned about our government schools because of the
5% only who are coming in as scholars, yes.
90% or 95%.
One of our callers during the week opined that is happening. I believe she was a teacher. That is happening because they take the cream of the public schools and send them to the government-assisted schools.
Well, maybe they did, but they had started zoning. They had started trying to share the the talent, share the talent at one point, but did not give the. I don't think they gave the teachers and the principals the wherewithal to help with the mix. So you will have the teachers still focusing on that 5% in the classroom.
While many more keep
And the
falling
rest
on the
say,
side.
they say, listen, you see, all you, I getting my money at the end of the month, if all you want to listen to me and learn, that is all your business. We have no support systems.
Well, that's a functionary and not a teacher. It's a whole different situation.
We need support systems in the school. And we have schools with like 1,000 plus children. And if you're looking at only 5%, and we really need to, we are at a point now where we have to. In my training in New York, schools had little buildings on the school compound that housed the social services and psychological services department on the compound. So you had an office. Okay, granted, they were able to build a building on the school compound so that there was a walkway from the school to this building. And if there was a problem with a child, you go across there, social worker begins, psychological counseling begins, parenting begins, everybody. If the parent isn't coming, you go to the home and find out what's going on. You do the home visit and ensure that the parent is able to get the time off, or the social worker or the guidance officer, the educational psychologist who will assess this child to see if the child could read and the numeracy literacy skills. Now, you see, all of this takes time. It's not a plaster on a sore. It takes concerted effort
and resources,
to ensure that this child who was giving trouble in class gets back on track.
We are coming into the area, listeners, of that violence that we see in school. We're getting there. We just taking our time to get there so that we cover all the areas. When I started the conversation, Doctor, I made the point about these numbers not being new in the sense of bullying in school way back in 1991. I mean, you're looking at numbers like 17% of school population in Scandinavia. You're looking Great Britain, their numbers in 93 said 14% of students are being bullied. Australia had 40%. The United States in 2003 had 8% of their school population being victim of bullying. The question is, are we, the media, are we generally, the population, reacting because it is easily reported now through social media? Has this in fact gotten worse, or is it now in our faces, as it were, so we are seeing the problem?
I think for me, it's a little bit of both, because when I see the kind of violence on the media and social media, the fighting, the girls pulling at the hair, dragging down the clothes, kicking, cuffing. When I see that kind of violence, I'm saying that has really gotten out of hand.
Back to the doorstep of the parent?
Well,
is my question.
I don't want to, because I really think parents are in a bind, because they're working, they have to work to take care of these children. A lot of these times, these children are unsupervised. They are unsupervised at home, and this goes way back. Because Mariama started because of that junior secondary school system that had 5-6 hours unsupervised if you were in a junior secondary school. So you were either on a morning shift and you had the afternoon unsupervised, or you were on an evening shift and whole morning you have nothing to do. and unsupervised because parents going to work.
But this is why sex education, family planning, your statement in 89 to understand the shifting of fathers and stepfathers and people moving through the home, that is why we must have more of that conversation, because you get to the point where you say, we are here. This is what is, not what we can do right now, but what can we do for those coming. And these kind of conversations must take place where we take the time to deal with young people, young girls right now, young people generally, because the man's got a major part in this, is two in the same part, and we start having conversations with them about all these things so that they understand that, look, you're gonna have sex. Look, stop it. They're gonna do it. They're gonna do it because they've got more people telling them about the virtues of it than ever before. Just pick up any social media thing, telephone or anything. All right, so they're going to do it, but you need to have the conversation from early, because nothing is worse than having an unaware child or somebody who just didn't pay attention. All right, go ahead and get pregnant, and now you have to raise a child, and you don't have the discipline within yourself, much less to pass it on with all the good intentions of being the best mother there is. If you don't have it latently in you, it is not going to surface. So we have to spend the time right now in ensuring we put the resources and go to the schools and talk it like it is, because there is nothing you can say in school that you're going to find less graphic than what they see picking up their phones.
And I think the community has to take up a lot of that issue, or if you want to say, take up the slack. The community. And it is very important that we go back to community looking after the children and helping. I mean, we have all these gated communities where those people who can afford to pay for these $1 million apartments or homes in a gated community. We keep talking about Trinidad and Tobago as a unified country and all the citizens working together.
Unified in their many enclaves.
Thank you. And everybody goes into behind these walls on evenings, and that's it. My colleague, Mrs. Valère, who I had on the program earlier this week, talked about, there was this whole issue of the Williamsville violence.
Yes.
Okay? And this was in the Newsday, and she said that there must be an investigation involving social workers, psychologists, police, community workers.
Yes.
We have to have a whole cadre, a team of people working, doing the investigation as to where these children, I keep saying, these children didn't drop from the sky. They live in a community.
Neither did this new manifestation of their behavior suddenly happen yesterday.
No, they live in a community. They live in a home. We need to find out what is the situation. I mean, many times we find that these children are themselves abused in the home. Yes, we have the Children's Authority that would help, but again, it is overwhelmed, understaffed. Since the act was proclaimed, you would have had thousands of calls, because people now know there's a place they could call. But call, and what happens after that? I heard the minister talk about, he's planning to have another consultation with stakeholders about this, in discipline and violence, about whether, because he said he said sex education was the responsibility of the parents.
Initially he said that, and when he realized that the public was one step ahead of him, he respectfully he said, okay, this was my position, but since I got my head out of the proverbial ostrich hole, I'm going to go along.
And we, again, because there would have been many reports somewhere, either in a shelf, well, if it was in a dustbin, it'd go on already. So that we keep doing the same thing over and over, because I think now the consultation time passed, it's time to implement.
But without question, it is one of the...
We know what the issue, we know what is going on. And for me, if the parents are not doing the sex education in school and at home, somebody has to do it. It has to be done.
And it is ridiculous. It is just as bad as to say that anybody passing on the street see a robber with a gun can stop that robber and disarm him and arrest him. You need professional people to do these things. It is fine to expect a parent is going to have a conversation. Look, we all have our own taboos. We all have our own reservations about stuff. Half of them is because we did it. Anyway, but so in the main, we may give our version of a truth, of an experience, an outlook, but you need a clinical explanation, first of all. A child must get a balanced, dispassionate explanation to something. And that is a very important part, because when the passion gets in fashion, then it twists the message.
It has to be, it's very difficult, I guess, for parents to be non-judgmental.
Yes.
With this kind of issue.
How am I going to tell my kid about this? How am I going to tell her about this?
And after all these years, this is the 21st century. It is exposed on, as they say, social media, all these reality shows that children sit and look at.
All the time.
That parents seem not able to manage.
They can't really
their
manage
viewing.
It. Some people say control everywhere you go.
Some parents do it.
They do.
Some parents have taken off cable. They don't want no cable.
Well, I applaud them, but next thing you do is turn off the telephone. There is no way you can escape the thing. It is everywhere. No, I applaud those who are doing it.
They do it, and it's working. Their children don't focus. They know what they are balanced.
But are they not better balanced? I'm sure you will agree, because this is not a question for you. You would be telling me it would be better for them to have a discussion on it. So when the other information comes from the unreliable sources, they are already prepared for it.
Well, the thing is, these parents would have communicated. They would have discussions. They have family conferences, and would have explained to the children why they think that they need to, at this time in their lives, focus on. And they would also be able to talk with them. A lot of them are able to speak with them about sexuality, how their mom and dad or mom alone, how they came into this world and what needs to be done. There's a very open. A lot of these parents didn't take off TV just so. They sat with the children.
Okay.
And the children are also very busy with extracurricular activities that they don't really have time for that.
So therein lies one of the things, because we're still on the track of school violence, and we're going to just jump into that part in just a moment. But therein lies another point that you made in 89 that is still germane now. Do we have sufficient extra school hours activities to involve kids in sports? Is one way. It is a way. It is one way. But there are many other things that are not present in the school. Could you identify and guide us and our listeners to some of them that would be helping in this situation?
Well, you did say sports. There is dance. There are all the performing arts, and one of the problems is that a lot of children and families need support, because a football tug's not cheap. A hockey stick, and the pads and the shin pads and the helmets and all the wristbands, whatever, the gloves, what they need, those things don't come cheap. And the children who need these activities to help them to even recognize their self-worth, their self-esteem, their confidence and what have you, need some kind of support. If it's a subsidy, the schools would have maybe the PE department. Yes, I know some PE departments would have equipment for the general usage. But they wouldn't have tugs for every child. Neither would they have the shin pads and the knee pads, and because all those things individuals, they have to get them. Okay, so there has to be some way that they work out that these children, and many times those children are not academically inclined, but they will have to have some literacy and numeracy, maybe the basic skills, communication skills, that you say, okay, you will do math, English, maybe human and social biology, and one more. You don't have to get 6 passes or 7 ones and 8 ones and 9 ones. You know, we will focus on these, and you have the sport that you are good at. And in some countries, I know from 3, 4, 5 years old, if they see that a child has this talent and is able to kick a ball and learn how to kick a ball with the techniques and what, they send them into some football program from very young.
At the end of the day, you can't recognize it if you're not exposed to it. And if you don't have the opportunities to expose it, then nobody's going to see it.
And if parents not listening and looking, you know, they have to know.
Yeah, well, again, you know, that whole social area of the parent is something that I know is beyond my pay grade, but you are the head of the Trinidad Tobago Association of Psychologists. You have worked in this area all the while. By the way, listeners, try to get hold of the book, Parents, Are You Listening? Of which my guest is the author. Parents, Are You Listening? And Children, Are You Listening? Teachers in the school. The question has been raised as to whether they inadvertently bully.
Inadvertently bully.
Yeah, well intended. But
I think it happens. Yes, it happens. But again, like parents, teachers are overwhelmed because they do not have the support. They do not have the support. Every school should have a team of service, psychological and social service providers so that teachers can get the help. We cannot expect teachers to leave a class wanting to focus on one child who has been maybe disturbing the class or doing something to distract. And it's easy to say, look, just get up and go and sit outside the principal's office. There are some teachers who might take the time, but then what is happening with the rest of the class?
Many do. Let me categorically state that my question was not fueled by my lack of appreciation for the pressures that teachers go through all the time. I'm very cognizant of that.
Well, yeah, we always recommended that a teacher, before his or her class, would sit maybe for about 5-10 minutes and have a discussion with the children. How was your night? What's happening at home? Is everything okay? Did you come to school? Did you have breakfast? Some of them come to school without breakfast.
Yes.
And they can't, I know there is some, I'm not sure what is happening with it now, the school lunches and the breakfast at some schools.
The equivalent of 2 pounds of glucose with the amount of sugar that they're taking in. And, of course, the child becomes hyperactive. And
well, we have to have well-balanced, meals. But, again, that has to be nationally coordinated. Yes, there are some parents who feel embarrassed if they put their child's name down on this lunch list or meal list. And those are some of the things that we have to attend to. Those parents do need some psychological help.
Also, let's put it across the board so it does not single out people.
Well, we have...
Because I understand what you're saying. Some folks are just poor and you just can't get yourself to accept your pride, don't want other people to know, and that is your pride area. Okay, those who reality say grow up. There's another thing. If we do the part we can to ease the stigma attached to it, then we're helping too, aren't we?
Well, yes, you said across the board, but there are some parents who could afford to feed a whole class. And their child will be getting lunch.
I would make it across the board, and then I'll do means testing.
Okay. No, well, that's an approach. Or
that way I remove the stigma, but I ensure that those who can afford it are not, in fact, abusing it. Take me into the schools now. We've got just about 20 minutes where we are, and I want to take a couple of phone calls if we can. But before that, I want to deal with the area of the violence that we're seeing in schools. A lot of what we did there in laying the path path to where we are now is germane. I trust that our listeners got that. But where we are here is where we are seeing violence that is either heightened because of social media bringing it in front of our faces, or in fact the numbers are really going up. What would you suggest we do with the kids who are in school right now? This upsurge you see in girls participating in these gang rituals, or anybody, whether it be girls or boys. What do we do about this right now? What's in school right now? I know we spoke about how we reach the other generation and what we saw before. It's right here. What do we do?
I think a lot of bullying happens because there is no supervision. No supervision. In the halls, outside, you hear principals saying it didn't happen on the school compound, it happened outside the gate. You know, those kinds of things. And I'm saying, okay, so it happened outside the gate, so he is not or she is not responsible.
Should we get some monitors for outside the gate? Should we get an increased police presence at the end of a day? I know the whole question of having increased police presence is frightening, but the alternative, it seems to be right now, is that things will continue being out of hand. So that's why I suggested first school monitors who do things outside.
Yes, the monitors would work, but the thing about the police, I mean, bullies need serious help.
Understood.
I'm not saying, okay, it is a criminal act and maybe they should be charged, but I'm not sure many parents whose children are bullied, they might find one or two deciding to press charges, but then the age of the children, and, you know, all these things come into play.
Anna Marie Mora is our guest. I am not for a moment suggesting that my first choice is the police, not at all. What I do know is, even though I disagreed with Mr. Giuliani and here in Trinidad, Mr. Griffith, even though I'm not too sure if I disagree with them on the question of a presence, in fact, does ease things down a bit. I wonder maybe that is what we have to do, because if they feel that nobody's watching, as you said, the community approach is the ideal approach. When people understand we all stakeholders and the village is going to raise the children. But we don't have that. We don't have that in the first place, and it is compounded by the fact that social media is making everybody in their own little world. Nobody talks to anybody anymore. All right, so that being the case, and that's why I ask you, what do we do where we are now? Do I increase the presence of police officers in the area just to tell the bully, you can't do it to the kid who is waiting? There's a kid waiting to be taken home. His head was shaved while he's waiting for his bus to go home.
Because there is nobody, they feel that they could do it
Precisely.
and get away with it, just like it's happening in our society.
Yeah.
If you don't get caught, you have done nothing
That's
wrong.
Right, sadly, yes.
And this is not the children alone. And the point about it is, for me, if we're looking at our young people as potential criminals, Rennie, we will put more police. If we're looking at them as potentially productive citizens of this country, we will employ more psychologists, more social workers, more educational psychologists, counseling psychologists, clinical. We will have more coaches.
Then I am happy that I pushed the envelope, because that's exactly what I wanted to hear you say. We have to realize that if you do not put the resources in increasing the many people that you spoke of, that Dr. Valère spoke about, which we when we have something go wrong, we bring in the social worker, we bring in the police, we bring in the parent, bring in the teachers, everybody. But it's going to cost money. It is going to cost money, because if you don't do that, then you're going to spend it in the prisons.
Yeah. And we need, as this, we have to do it now. If we have to, and you could save plenty of money. You would save money.
And we'd employ people too.
Yeah, and there are, I mean, we do have, I think there are a lot of people with degrees in psychology, clinical. I mean, they are young, coming out of the university. They will need supervision while they work, because they are young and they need to get the experience to be able to practice, and so they will need supervision of experienced psychologists so that they can do that. But they are there. They are coming out, because we have a program. We have a clinical program at UE we have counseling programs at some other universities, Southern Caribbean, and we have a lot of young psychologists doing their masters coming out into the system, and but they have to be trained, because the internships that they do are not enough. The hours are not enough for them to really pick up on the techniques and how they can change one young person's thinking or life or family's thinking. They need supervision.
It is 11:45. I just want to go back to a point you made a moment ago, and a denominational head articulated the same thing. You can do wrong as long as you're not caught. Unfortunately, a lot of our kids seeing that message. That is a whole different direction for a talk show, which we will deal with, because I say this: the nation is at a position now where you have to grab some wrongdoers and do something about it, because that way you tell people this is not the way to go. So that's a crossroad by itself.
Last week, Monday, on the front page, one of our MPs says, "I will not be bullied." A big front page, because he perceived that whatever was happening to him in Parliament was bullying. And if it's okay for MPs to criticize in a very, demeaning manner, and use the kinds of words that I see on the front page too, what they expect young people to do. And that those words are being repeated over and over and over.
Not only that, the lack of civility in the House itself. You listen to somebody making a contribution, and voices are coming from all sides, and the speaker's got to come up like the teacher every moment. Children, be quiet, be quiet. And I go like, no example at all. Let me pass on our telephone numbers to our listeners: 628-2250, 628-2250, and 628-9107. We're talking about bullying. We're talking about the responsibility of the society to collectively raise children. We are talking about violence in schools. We are talking about two victims here: the actual victim of bullying, and then, of course, you've got the perpetrator, who is a victim himself, and the need for stepping in. So we are saying, in fact, that teachers need help. Are you hearing, coming out of the government right now, with the new dispensation, everyone said they're feeling, cognizance of what is needed here and a willingness to put resources behind it?
The consultation with stakeholders, I guess, shows us some willingness. I know the PTA president, and there are a lot of other organizations that are calling, but all these people were kind of involved in all these various national consultations before, and reports would have come out.
You've heard too much talk.
And I am saying it's time to implement. We need to implement. Now it is very sad that we are seeing, I don't know, they again talking about an empty treasury. And this thing we talked earlier that needs resources and financial resources to help the people who know what needs to be done, and who are experienced and could have been involved in doing this over the years. And we are still expecting a lot of these people to do things for free.
I'm not very much moved off times when I hear things about, I'm aware of it, but I'm not moved by off times when I hear about the treasury being empty. Listen, to paraphrase Nelson Mandela, a nation is going to be judged by the way it treats its prisoners, one, and a nation is also judged by the way it makes its investment. At the end of the day, sometimes you operate deficits. Deficits are fine. Trust me, private sector will tell you about that. Deficits are fine. You have to do that sometime if you prioritize where your money should go. And this is very clear to us that whatever our constraints are, we can find money to do this, because at the end of the day, wherever you save money to put, if it is not enjoyed, by the citizenry, then you've wasted your time. I am, please.
No, I was saying that when I started the youth center, I had a little tagline: "In an investment in youth is an investment in your country's future."
Yes.
And that was since 1990, and now we are, and everything seems to be spiraling out of control because we didn't do it then. I was told at that time that investing in something like a youth center is going to be too expensive.
You've been very...
At that time. Okay? And that I had my head in the clouds. Because I just come back from Colombia and I feel I this and I that. You understand? So, okay. I just had to step back. So...
I am always disturbed by those who are willing to disparage. I'm going to come back for the top 3 things that you would recommend. I do have some bills to pay. And I do want to, because you've been very, very kind with your time and modest about your school. You started talking about it a little bit. Won't you tell us? Maybe we should just do that now. Tell us a little bit more of this school that you started.
Well, it is... I keep saying I don't want it known as a school because Sharon don't like school.
Okay. How would we put it?
It's an activity center.
Activity center, good enough.
It's a counseling and activity center for young people where they come. It's a safe space. They can come and talk about anything and do not feel judged. We had a placard demonstration on the streets of Aruca one time. The children made the placards. They would say, "Parents, be real with us. Talk to us about sex." Everything that they wanted to tell parents, they did it on a placard, and we went outside on the main road and started to demonstrate. And those kinds of things I would do. I work at taking them out of Trinidad and Tobago. Well, we go to Tobago, Dominica, St. Lucia. They just need to know that there's a big wide world out there. And as the world is big, so that their talent is, they have to find what their talent is. I'm there to help them to find their talent. I mean, I taught English and social studies, so I would help with their literacy skills at times. But a lot of times it is to work with them at their self-esteem. And it is extremely difficult. Yes, they come to me, but they have to leave and go home. And there are times when I have to help parents to understand that it's either what do you see, or what did you see when you held this baby when this baby was born? Did you see this baby as a 20-year-old or 18-year-old? What kind of 18-year-old or 14-year-old did you see this child 14 years down the road? At 14, I asked, do you see this child 10 years down the road? What are we doing now to help this child to be a productive adult who will be contributing to society, contributing to peace and progress, creating beauty, producing order? What are we doing now? And there are things that we need to do now. A parent met me and said, "Miss Mora, thank you so much." I did a parenting program. She said, there's a template for parenting. And I used it and it worked. There are people who will listen.
Are you able to, because it's a CSO discussion from a broader side, but are you able to measure the success not just of your activity center, but of the so-called preferred schools? Because and that I want to ask that it is important for folks who seem to put this to relegate this to the side of the behavior of a certain income bracket. This bullying, the behavior is one of those people. Do we have any yardstick, any barometer to measure if this is in fact across the board, or as I believe is wrongly assumed it belongs to a certain track?
Well, I'm not sure. What I know is some of these preferred schools have serious resources and equipment. I mean, every classroom there's a school, every classroom is air conditioned.
Okay.
Every classroom is fitted with multimedia. And the teachers feel good coming to school every day.
Teachers feel good, the students feel good.
And
there's
and
optimism.
there's constant training about using multimedia in your with your lessons. But the children also are able to socialize and get along with each other. And a lot of them know where they're going. And what it is going on here is going to determine what happens with them at 18, 19 when they leave school.
If we are to do a synopsis of our discussion this morning, we are saying a couple of things. There is need for system evaluation and intervention programs without question. We are saying we need to have more psychologists, more mental health service professionals in the school system. We have said that, in fact, we need for us to look at the involvement of parents, not just in lip service, but provide the avenue, the opportunity for them to come to a place and discuss these issues. And we have to start working very hard with real talk, not the nice peripheral kind of discussion. Real talk with our kids about what they encounter every day.
I just wanted to say that the whole thing about parenting, yes, there are some national programs that are sporadic, in spot areas, but there are some organizations that run parenting programs, but because the parents you might have a 6-week program, which I think is not enough because they have to have follow-up and keep these parents on track. So you need to bring them back ever so often to see if they're using the skills, what's happening with them, etc. And maybe you might charge $100 a session, and you give the first session free, at least the orientation. So come and let's hear what we will be doing with you, and you look at the curriculum and what have you. And when they hear they had to pay $100 a session, the next session, maybe 60 would have come out to the orientation. And when it really starts and they have to put the little money,
that's
10 or 20.
That's the whole education.
Or 10, that would come because they really, some of them need that money to go to the grocery.
Yes.
So
yes, and in some cases to buy the latest handbag. Anyway, did I say that? No, I'm sorry.
Anyway,
unfortunately, but some of the NGOs I would expect can also step in here.
Well, of course, but the thing is, many of those NGOs are not getting funding. We don't get funding, and it is left to the founder or the directors to put money in their, pocket, take their hand, put money in, take money from their own personal pension or whatever you're getting to make sure that this program continues and keeps running. Mariam is 25 years this year.
Folks like yourself who've been doing this for a long time can become jaded, but I hope that you find a little encouragement every time you look around and see a bright mind willing to move forward, because we need folks like yourself to remain engaged. This is going to be a long process, and sometimes you beat the tree long enough.
We have techniques that we calm ourselves down.
Good,
and
I
get
need to learn
ourselves
some.
Yeah, no problem. Call me.
President of the Trinidad and Tobago Association of Psychologists, author of the book Parents, Are You Listening? And Children, Are You Listening? The author you're looking for is counseling psychologist Anna Maria Mora, who took up her time to be with us. Thank you very much for the context. Thank you very much for the conversation. Thank you for the clarity you brought and the encouragement.
Thank you.
Have yourself a wonderful day. The
Same
pleasure
to
was
you.
totally ours. Have yourself a wonderful week ahead.
Same to you.
Thank you so much.